an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sex Education, Season 2, Episode 6. In this episode, Otis decides that he's going to prove how cool and laid back and spontaneous he is by hosting a small gathering at his house, which turns into a giant, wild house party. And then it looks like he maybe fucked Ruby. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode, and she came early and dropped all of the names that I'll probably need to know through this episode in the chat before I came, because she wasn't going to be able to make it. Major thanks to you, Ashleigh. This will be incredibly helpful, I have no doubt. So, guys, this episode was really fun. I really, really liked this one. Probably the ending of the episode with the headmaster Xeroxing Jean's notes is the worst of the, cliffhangers that this show has pulled off. Because I genuinely do not know what to make of what he, is he going to circulate this and give all of the pages away around the school so that they can all see what she wrote? Because that feels like what he's doing. And that's petty, which, he's definitely capable of petty for sure. Look at the guy. But it's petty in a way that doesn't seem to profit him specifically. So I just don't see it. He tore the pages out, apparently, that have to do with him. And that's part of why I think it's going to be handed around to the public, because he just made sure to protect himself first. But I don't know. Maybe there is something else going on here, or maybe it's just going to be for his, personal knowledge, because he wants to be able to... I don't know. But I think that was a really solid ending to the episode, because it made me go, wait, what? So, all right, this whole episode, this is basically the episode where people get drunk and tell the truth. But I have to start it off with, Tony says if he wants Jean gone, he may think this will get her fired. That occurred to me too, and I was just like, man, if he thinks that's going to work, it would be really interesting if he tried it, but I just don't think that he has any understanding of what they are going to be upset by, because she's just doing her literal job, and that seems to be enough for him to think she should be fired. But it just feels like he is so out of touch with what they want. So I guess we'll see. God, this episode is so all over the place that it's hard for me to know where to start. I'm going to talk about Jean and, I'm forgetting the headmaster's wife's name. Is that in the list? Ooh, it's not. I'm sorry, Ashleigh. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that right out of the gate. I feel like it was something with an M. Maureen? Might have been Maureen. But Jean goes out to have drinks with her. Because Otis has asked her to not be home so that he can have this party. I will say that I appreciate Jean just clearing out and letting him do this. It's sort of a mark, in my opinion, of how much she wants to give him room to open up socially. Because a lot of parents would be like, you want me to leave so you can host a party while I'm gone? I doubt it. I think partially he downplays that it's going to be a party because he doesn't intend it to be, and that's part of what makes her comfortable doing this. But, even so, I do appreciate her letting him have this opportunity, though. So she goes out with the lady that I'm going to call Maureen. Hopefully that's correct. And they talk at the bar. Maureen doesn't even know what to get as a drink. She says that she used to always get what Michael got, which I think is the headmaster's first name. Did she say Michael? I'm just making up names left and right here. It's fine. And it's one of those moments that I find really like sad and compelling. And I wonder how many women experience this sort of thing because, you know, today women still get plenty of judgment for not getting married, for not having kids. But it's not like it used to be where you were genuinely considered to be like defective somehow. Nowadays, it's just sort of like, oh, she's one of those feminist types. And it's just sort of, you know, it's looked on with a sort of mixed view. And it used to be a much more uniform view where a woman who didn't get married and have children, people just waited for that to happen for her entire life and were so scrutinized for it that a lot of women just decided to get married to shut everybody up. Like, genuinely, that is an experience I have heard from a few women. It's just, yeah, I got married because, like, nobody would fucking stop talking about it. And I was just like, all right, fine, you know? Oh, Maureen is in the chat. Dion says that that Maureen's name is there. I'm sorry, I missed it somewhere. But anyway, so this whole thing that she has where she doesn't even know what drink to get. I am such an opinionated person, and I always want what I want. And the concept of having so little of your own agency that you don't even know what drink to order is wild to me and really sad. And it's wonderful to see her like trying things out and doing new stuff. Adam's mom, Maureen, is the top of the thank you, Dion. I'm sorry, Ashleigh, I didn't see it. But it's really sad to think of how many women never actually got the chance to break out. You know, there have been so many women in history who got married because they sort of had to. There was not a lot of options for women. If you didn't want to become either a teacher or a nurse, you got married. Those were the two jobs that you got to do. You could be a secretary, but only really if you were unmarried. The secretary who was married didn't really get hired. It was not as frequent a thing. There were a lot of jobs like that it's like, well, until you're married, you can do this. And then after that, obviously, your husband will take care of you. And I just really can't imagine how trapped women must have felt. How little was afforded them. And it's like, guys, I saw circulating a fact a few months back about how women weren't allowed to have their own checking accounts without a husband on the account until something like 1970. It was so late in the previous century that I was like, that can't be right. What are you supposed to do if you are unable to command your own finances? If you literally can't even have a bank account, you have to get married in order to do anything that requires a bank account, or else you have to be like on your parents' bank account, I guess. Just simple things like that. And men really think that like there's this completely untrue narrative that women haven't made great contributions or discoveries in history, which is all garbage because men just took credit for the shit we did. But let's say women didn't. Let's just go with that bullshit narrative. Whose fault is that, dickheads? You wouldn't even let us buy a fucking car without a man married to us. Even today, women who are trying to get their tubes tied are being told no because their husband hasn't approved it, even though they're not married yet. And maybe never will be. Just the number of things that a man was required for in the past and is still required for now blow my mind. And this scene with her genuinely, like, closing her eyes and just picking something on the menu because she is so unused to making her own choices. It's beautiful and it's heartbreaking. How much of her life has passed her by just in misery because she was feeling like she had no other choices available. Ugh, kills me. So they get drunk and they have like a heart to heart a little bit where she talks about like a fantasy that she had having sex with her Zumba instructor. Jean talks about splitting up with Jakob, and then they go out dancing, and it's so much fun. I love it. And Maureen is telling her on the dance floor, like, I do miss him, but I feel so free. And that's when Jean confesses that she actually thinks she made a mistake with Jakob, and she says that she misses him. And I just really don't want this show to make it that Jean was too hard on him. I'm still so on her team in this respect. And it feels like they're going to have her walk back some of the shit she said. Walk back some of the shit she said. And I don't want that to happen because I really don't think she was being unreasonable. She made her requests very clear, and he ignored them because he acted like he knew what was best for her. And I think she was in the right. So we'll see what happens there. But Maureen goes home and Michael is in the driveway, and he had like left to remind her, but he's in the driveway like waiting for her and asks if she's drunk, and she says a little bit, and he asks her to take him back. And she just basically tells him to let it go and pats him on the chest and goes inside. And this is when he goes to the school and breaks into Otis's locker to get the book out. So obviously he blames Jean for the split between him and his wife. This is just such a classic thing. Like, people don't want to see that outside forces aren't enough to split you up from somebody. You guys have to be a not very solid couple for that to happen. That there is something going on between you guys. This is like the same thing as a woman blaming the woman that her husband cheated with instead of blaming the husband. It's like, no, that woman didn't force him to do anything. He chose to cheat. It's him that you should have a problem with. The woman is not the fucking problem. So yeah, his whole like trying to blame Jean is just honestly pitiful. So, all right, we're going to back up. We're going to talk about this episode from start to finish from here, but I just wanted to talk about Jean and what's going on there. So we start off the episode as we usually do with a sex scene, and it's Anwar and this guy that he's seeing, Nick. Thank you, Ashleigh. Nick. And they are fooling around, and Nick says we should have sex. And Anwar realizes that he means like full-on anal sex. And Anwar has never done this before, but he tries to pretend that he has because he feels weird about it. And he immediately like gets on all fours. Apparently they have agreed that he's the bottom. I have to say, Anwar has a perfect ass. I mean, goddamn. His undies are like pulled down like halfway down his ass, and I was just like, good God, those are like perfect half spheres, sir. How? He must do a lot of squats. And this dude asks him, did you already douche? Unless you're cool with it maybe being a bit messy. And Anwar says, like, no, of course I already did. Yeah, I definitely did. But you know what? I'm going to go wash my hands. That's how much I care about washing my hands. I'm just going to go wash my hands right now. No big deal, whatever. And then he goes into the bathroom and calls in a code red. And I think it's Ruby that calls him, and, oh no, it's Olivia that calls him and is like, hey, oh my God, somebody mugged me, in order to make it so that he has an excuse to leave, which he really doesn't pull off. Like, he clearly thinks that he did, but it's obvious. And poor Nick is just left sitting there like, what the fuck? So this was interesting to me because obviously there's very little out there that does an honest sort of presentation of what man-on-man sex is like. I say man-on-man, but really I should, like, when I'm saying that, I'm meaning cis-man, 2 penises. How would one call that? But there's like, it's always presented as just like, oh yeah, you can just fuck wherever, whenever, it's fine. And I found it really refreshing that they address the fact that there's like a whole separate sort of anxiety around having anal sex, even like heterosexual anal sex, because of the potential for it to get messy. And that can happen. I have luckily never had it happen, but I had a very close friend when I was in my early 20s, and he was seeing this guy who was supernaturally hot, like the kind of hot that you literally can't look away because you're just so, like, you're staring at every plane of this person's face trying to find a flaw somewhere, and there's nothing. He was dating a guy like that, and they were having sex, and he was the bottom, and the guy pulled out, and he just shit all over the bed. And it was pretty much for him like the most humiliating thing that ever happened. And I think he kept seeing the guy after that. Like they got past it, but he was pretty certain that was going to be it. And it turned out to not be, because the other dude kind of understood. When you are in this world and you do this, you have to understand that there's a potential for this shit happening, pun intended. But yeah, it is something that doesn't get talked about. And I mean, especially if we're just looking at like gay porn, it's always treated like, oh yeah, you can just at the drop of a hat, have sex anywhere, and it's not going to be any sort of issue. And there are people that are going to be a lot more self-conscious about it than others. It's not that you can't, it's that there's a level of comfort that you have to have with yourself and with the other person, where if it does get messy, you know they're going to be okay with it, and that you're going to be able to handle it and not feel weird about it. And I mean, plenty of people are not in that place. I know that for myself, it's like something that I would probably be more paranoid about now. When I was younger, I feel like our bodies are just like more capable of handling and being in control a little bit. But as you get older, I mean, even just like trying not to pee when you have to pee really bad gets harder when you're older. So this would be something I would be a lot more frightened of now, and be like, well, I think everything would work the way it's supposed to, but I don't know, actually. So Anwar's being so self-conscious about this makes a lot of sense. And I have to imagine that there's so many young gay men out there who worry a lot about how this all works. And this show being so straightforward with how it presents all of this is incredibly refreshing. And I also love when Otis goes, because Anwar goes to Otis asking for advice later, and Otis winds up going to Eric and Raheem. And Raheem is like, oh yeah, I can definitely tell you all about this, and literally like presents a presentation. It's really, really great. I appreciate it a lot. I love that Raheem is so comfortable and so matter of fact. And I also was thinking about this the other day. I love the fact that Otis is presented as a hetero guy with a gay best friend, that there is no feeling of like homophobia surrounding anything with the two of them. Even like, he is in front of Eric with a huge boner, and Eric is just pointing and laughing at it. Like, there is nothing about this being like, oh my God, I have a boner in front of my dude friend who's gay, and this is so weird, and what if he, like, none of that. And this is something that I feel like would not have been able to happen just a few years ago. There would have been like weirdness around it. And I love that it's presented with no commentary and no hesitation at all. So anyway, in the end, Anwar, like, he goes directly to Raheem and is like, dude, you got to tell me about douching. Like, I started to talk to Otis about it, and he was mid-sentence and vomited into his cup of beer, which is the worst, you guys. Oh my God. So please tell me. And Anwar's like, why don't you ask Raheem says, why don't you ask your boyfriend? And Anwar says, I don't want to talk to him about this. And Raheem's like, if you can't talk to him about douching, you are not ready for his cock in your ass. Which, touche. That's the kind of thing that I think is very true, but it's also so much easier said than done. In this situation, because they are both cis men, it's a different scenario. And I think that Raheem is much more on the money here. But a lot of people will say this sort of thing to girls regarding their being open with boyfriends about what's going on with their bodies. And it's like, yeah, okay, in theory, sure. But also there's a huge amount of like weird misogyny and body shaming directed specifically toward women. And they are going to be naturally anxious about that because they have seen and heard it their whole lives, and being more open with a partner about that stuff. Again, I think it's true. You shouldn't sleep with somebody that you can't talk about that stuff with. But it's so much higher a bar than many men are able to clear, unfortunately, that I can understand a lot of women out there just being like, look, probably it would be better, but whatever. I just would like to fuck, so I'm not going to talk about that. And I sort of get it, you know? The number of men who still think that women pee out of their vaginas. I mean, let's not even start with that. Even also like a couple, or was it last episode? It was the previous episode where Jean has the model of the vagina that she's showing to the women in the workshop, and she like pulls the clit out, and the clit is like way bigger than that. Actually, it's like a whole other shape. And it was weird when she pulled it out that it's just this one little button. I was like, that's actually hugely inaccurate. I'm surprised the model isn't better built, but there it is. Let's see. Ayantu says, yeah, and boys/men don't grow out of that for a very long time if they do at all. Exactly. The number of men that are still grossed out by periods. And like, look, the thing is, as a woman, periods are gross. They just are. I'm not even trying to deny that. But like, we get to be grossed out because we have to deal with them. You don't get to be grossed out because you don't have anything to do with any of this, and y'all are completely on easy street, re your bodies, which change very little from teenage to death. So just don't fucking talk about it. We are the ones that have to deal with like black clotted blood that comes out a week after we fucking thought we were done. We are the ones who have to deal with like all our clothes getting stained and wearing specific pajamas because those are the ones that won't show the blood stains. Like, we are the ones that go through the pain and the headaches and the nausea and the cramping. We get to say that it's gross. Y'all don't, because really, how is this even affecting you? Ever? Oh, I fucked a woman and it turned out she was on her period. You're welcome. You got to fuck her. I really don't get what you're like upset. Shut up. Just literally never talk about it. Shut up. If we want tampons, go get them. If we want pads, go get them. If we want ice cream, chocolate, wine, go get them. And then stop talking about it. That's my advice. There it is. Okay. So that is what goes on with Anwar. Eventually he does go and talk to Nick, and Nick is just like, why didn't you just tell me? And he was like, it was weird. And Nick offers to show him, and they leave together. So, best of luck, Anwar. Even though you are kind of a dick. But, honestly, you were a dick mostly this episode to Otis, who deserves it. Let's talk about Otis. I don't want to talk about Otis. Oh my god, you guys. Alright, so, God, where to start? First of all, I am hopeful that we get this new character, Isaac, because the show is realizing that Otis does not deserve Maeve, and they are giving her an alternative. Because honestly, there is just no way Otis should have any girlfriend ever. He needs to grow up 1,000% more than he is right now. So the episode starts off with him being unwilling to see how uptight he is. He's talking with Eric on the way to school about how that's what Ola said to me and that he needs to prove her wrong. And, you know, this is one of those things that as a teenager, when somebody tells you something about yourself that you don't really want to hear or that has negative connotations, historically speaking, you do fight against that. But when you're older, like me, and somebody tells you that maybe you are a little bit uptight or try to micromanage or are a control freak, you just have to be like, yes, that's true. And then continue living your life and learn how to manage those aspects of yourself, like while making space for the fact that part of you will always be like that. Also recognize how to ameliorate the effects on the people around you whom you may be offending or harming or whatever. But when you're younger, you still don't really know who you are, and you are convinced that like people's perceptions of you have to be wrong because we are told a story about how, well, nobody can know you like you know yourself. And it's like, no, sometimes when everybody's telling you that you're a certain way, sometimes that's because that's how you are. Not always. Sometimes you're surrounded by people who are not good for you and they don't understand you and they are, you know, but sometimes it's because that's how you are. And so he just decides that he is going to throw a party, and that's how he's going to prove that he is like spontaneous and fun. And he doesn't even want to throw a party. He wants to have a gathering. It's very like, and he says, he's going to roast a chicken, which I don't think anybody has ever topped that for the line of somebody who's uptight and doesn't know how to host a party. I have seen a lot of this kind of plot device before. And I'm going to roast a chicken is miles ahead of every other punchline. That is it's not even just that it's like a nerdy thing. It's just that it's so weird and so baffling that he thinks that's what people want. Like, what are you doing? It's like he's already 55 and hosting a dinner party for like colleagues at work or something. And he's about to try and figure out, you know, all of these hors d'oeuvres or something. Like, dude, what are you talking about? I loved not only how he keeps bringing up the chicken, but then eventually he does roast a chicken and he just eats it in his own 2 hands while dancing, which I'll tell you what, roasting a chicken and having that be the basis of your teen party is ridiculous. But I will give him this. When you have gotten drunk, if you've gotten stoned also, you're willing to put any amount of effort into making a food. Like, it suddenly just yeah, I know what I'll do. Oh, I've got a chicken. I'm just going to roast the chicken real quick. Hold on. And then an hour and a half later, you have a whole roast chicken and you're just like, oh, life is absolutely perfect right now. This could not get better. And it's fine. Now, that's because he was already in that space and the house is so chaotic that nobody cares and it's just for him. But the fact that he was thinking to do this so that everybody could have some chicken, like, it's just, get a pizza for fuck's sake, Otis, because he keeps being like, what are people going to eat? Get a pizza. You know, Eric just has crisps. And I'm like, yeah, probably that is enough. You could do pizza. But, you know, I think as a grown-up, you really want food because then you don't have people drinking to the point where they are going to have alcohol poisoning on an empty stomach. However, if you add food into the equation with people who are going to purposely push themselves to drink a lot, like teenagers do, then you start to develop the risk of vomiting. And that is indeed what Otis begins to battle with a little bit later. So Otis sees at one point his mother and Ola talking together. And he gets very sort of paranoid about what could be going on between the two of them and what Ola has said about him to his mother. And he sneaks into her office and he steals her book, which I was just surprised that she doesn't immediately notice it's missing, because that's like the most important part of her record keeping. So I would think she would immediately catch that it was not on her desk, but it's fine. And he eventually like just stores it in his locker, and that is what the principal sees and decides to go steal. Also, I forgot to mention this when I talked about Jean. She gets a call from a publisher, and I was right. Fucking Remy is trying to pretend that they're going to write something together again, because he's trying to ride the coattails of what she had going on with her manuscript. And I am so over this fucking guy, and I love that she's just like, I'm not writing with him, he's a massive twat, and just hangs up. So Otis, unbeknownst to him, Eric is like going around and inviting a lot of people to this thing, and the like size of the party begins to grow and grow and grow. And we see, Eric going around and inviting different people. Eventually, the school day ends, and Raheem goes to pick Eric up. And it's an interesting thing. I really liked this, that they have it be that Eric's mother is apparently fine with it. Raheem's like, I'm his boyfriend. And she's like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me you had a boyfriend? And he's just like, nothing, no, it's fine. And it's interesting to see that Eric is so concerned about this, even though he is out, and he tells Raheem he came out when he was like 13. And evidently, like, she has no issue with the fact that he has a boyfriend. She seems happy for him. So the weirdness is his father keeps on being like, what is your mother going to say? Or what is she going to think? And I'm like, okay, so has that been like kind of a con this whole time? And it's really his dad that's uncomfortable, but he's claiming that Eric has to shield his mother from it because it makes him uncomfortable, and he doesn't know how to say that, because that sort of looks like from the outside what's been going on, actually. But I was just surprised by that, because like I said, we have hardly had any contact with her. And I have been wondering what the deal is with her based on how his father kept presenting her, But yeah, so they head on over to the party, and we have that moment a little bit later when Otis opens the door and he sees like this crowd standing outside. And honestly, this is the kind of thing that I wish was more true. I have tried to host parties that went this way. I have always wanted to be at a house party like this. I eventually got there, but I was 26 by the time it happened. I was not a teenager. I was in college. And it was as great as I thought it would be. It was so much fun. But this whole thing with like, oh yeah, you just invite a lot of people and they all come. That is very rarely how that works. People don't want to hang out with folks that they don't know super well a lot of the time. And they always like check and see if other people want to go first. And if everybody isn't totally on board, then they decide not to go. So this is one of those things that is a trope in a lot of stuff, but it doesn't happen like this most of the time. But it's very encouraging to watch it with Otis, because honestly, he needed this. He needed something to happen to him that he had to roll with, to prove that he's just so laid back. So Eric eventually goes up to Otis and is like, here, have a beer, dude. Chill out. Enjoy things. And Otis takes it a little bit too far, as he is wont to do. Otis doesn't know how to be balanced about stuff. He just goes from 0 to 11. And those are his two settings. And I can fucking relate, to be honest. It's been something I've been working on a lot lately, is trying to be more like in the middle. And he texts Ola once he realizes, like, oh, she wasn't invited, so she's not going to be able to, like, notice that I'm throwing a party and realize how completely, relaxed and laid back I am, actually. So he texts her to come and pick some stuff up. And he's so weird about it, you guys. I just hated this so much. So he tells her to pick some stuff up, but he's really like, it's obviously all just to get her here. He doesn't even have them on him. He's just like, oh yeah, a shirt and a mug and some other stuff that he has sort of come up with on the spur of the moment. It's very transparent. She's also a little hurt at the fact that he's having this gathering and didn't invite her. And it just goes to show how much more sort of enlightened she is, because the fact that he would do this just to be spiteful, like throw a party and invite her, or throw a party and tell her to come over but not invite her, it doesn't seem like it really occurs to her right away, because she would never do something this fucking childish. So it begins to sink in eventually. But I really love when she like goes into his mom's office to get the tool belt out, and she has to walk by this couple that are just fucking like animals on the desk and do not care that she is here at all. That really was pretty funny. I'm going to jump to the end here, and we're going to talk about Otis's speech. This is so bad. Otis gets up on the coffee table. He's super drunk by now. He already like vomited into a cup in front of Anwar. And he goes and gets on this fucking table. It's really like interesting in comparison to when, say, Jackson got up on a table in front of Maeve, how extremely differently these went. And he tells everybody about how he was dating Ola, that he liked Maeve way more than he liked Ola, but he was trying to be a good boyfriend, so he stopped seeing Maeve, but that Maeve likes to play with people's feelings. I didn't invite her, and she came, and she brought this man with her. I don't know, probably just here to make me jealous. Definitely didn't work. And he looks up at Maeve and says it definitely did. All in all, I think she's probably the most selfish person I've ever met. Which is just like, wow, man. Sincerely? Like, and I think it's good that I'm not going out with either of them. Because I think I deserve a whole lot more. Thank you for coming. Good night. Not good night. Stay. Enjoy yourselves. No. And Ola rightfully turns to Maeve and says, "You're welcome to him," and just leaves. Good for you, girl. And Maeve leaves also. This is just so... It's so gross. Like, what are you doing? What are you... Sincerely, what did he... I am dying to know what he's going to think when he wakes up in the morning. Because as we see, he keeps drinking, despite the fact that he is literally vomiting. He keeps drinking, which is just such a bad plan. And we see him like getting up against Ruby as the night continues, like dancing up on her. And eventually, in the or later on that evening, when his mother comes home, she goes up to his room, opens the door, and finds him naked in bed with Ruby, which we are all assuming that they had sex, because that seems like the logical conclusion. But They may not have. It certainly looks like they did, but who knows how things actually went. And yeah, I'm just hoping that when Otis wakes up in the morning, he is like so full of shame that he doesn't go to school. Because that's really, he should just switch schools. That's what he should do. So, okay, that's everything with Otis. I'm going to back up. We're going to talk about Jackson. We really have to talk about Viv. First of all, Viv is asking Jackson once again for like advice on how to talk to this dude that she likes. And she begins to really realize that Dex sucks. He's talking about the Rubik's Cube. And at one point he asks her favorite color. And she answers seafoam green. And he's like, no. Like favorite color on the cube. And she just literally walks away, which is truly, this is one of those moments where I'm like, all right, look, I understand that you don't have a lot of experience with guys, but in this case, I feel like that's only to the good, because a lot of women would not have just gotten up and walked away right there. And that was absolutely the right call to make. Like, honestly, I was so proud of her in that moment. She was just like, oh my God, you know what? And just fucking leaves. Man, if I had just done that during a couple of conversations in my life, that was some good shit. I just really appreciated her. She goes and finds Jackson and tells him, you need to save me from Dex. When she comes in, she is interrupting Jackson almost punching the mirror in Otis's room. And this is really interesting. So Jackson got the cast cut off of his arm. And his mother is immediately asking when he can start training again. Of course, his white mom. And Ashleigh gave me their names. White mom, Roz. Black mom, Sophia. Thank you very much, Ashleigh. So yeah, Roz is asking, when can you start training again? And Sophia can see that Jackson is not excited or into this. And she tries to, like, later on when they're at dinner, sidetrack the conversation and say, maybe he doesn't want to talk about training right now. And Roz is like, well, that's just implying that you don't want to talk about it right now. And I'm like, or she can fucking read the room, dude. You know? But like, so Jackson is under so much pressure, even from his teammates who are all like, hey, I saw that you got it taken off. Good deal, man. I can't wait to fucking go up against you in practice tomorrow. And he begins to have a panic attack. So he goes up to Otis's room and he's about to punch this mirror when Viv walks in and is like, what the fuck? And he finally confesses everything to her about the pressure and the fact that he hurt his own hand. He broke his own hand. And that he cannot cope with this. And that when his arm was broken, the pressure was off and it felt amazing. And now it's back and he doesn't know what he's going to do. And Viv, in a moment that I think is really interesting, she points out that he is self-harming. And I'll be honest, you guys, I did not think of it in that light. Because I have always seen self-harming as doing something purely because you are feeling such like self-loathing or sadness that you are trying to either feel something or you are trying to kill yourself, potentially, you know? You're trying to release some horrible tension or sadness. And there's also a release of adrenaline that could come with like cutting. And that is like a very different objective than trying to break your hand because it's going to get you out of something, which feels so very focused and purposeful that I didn't put it in the same category as self-harm, because that comes from me with a whole different set of baggage. But really, it should have occurred to me that it's got a different motivation behind it. But it's still him being willing to hurt himself because he can't handle how he's feeling. Like, it's a little bit more circuitous, you know? And there's a lot more outside, what's the word I want? Influence, I suppose, because of the way that his parents and his friends are talking to him. But it is self-harm. And it just when she put it like that, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think of this. And she says something about how people who self-harm are some percentage more likely to attempt suicide, and that he really needs professional help. And he gets extremely upset. Not only that she suggested that he needs professional help, but the citing of statistics in this moment. He says, you think you have no friends because you don't have any time, but it's really because you're a fucking robot. Really harsh. That was way harsh, Ty. And she gets up and leaves, and as it turns out, she goes straight to his house and talks with his parents. This is one of those things, guys. I understand her decision in a way, but knowing that the way that Roz is, I would never go talk to her. You know, and I don't know how you decide that you're only going to talk to Sophia and get that to happen. Like, you can't knock on the door and be like, you stay there, you come outside. But the purpose behind her doing this is because she's worried that he's going to do something drastic. And she's trying to help him get help that he is refusing to acknowledge he even needs. So on the one hand, I do get what she's attempting here. However, people, depending on who they are, a lot of people do not cope well with the news that somebody that they love was self-harming. And especially when it's their child, this can go really badly. Really badly. And it can turn into either I'm blaming myself for everything, or how could you do this to me? Or even worse, pretending that you don't know. Trying to act like everything is fine. Which is one that I have seen firsthand with other friends of mine who have been on the brink. And their family member is like, I'll just cook you your favorite dinner and otherwise not talk to you about this at all. But hopefully your favorite dinner will be enough. No, that's nothing. And I just wish that there was a way for her to reach out for help that didn't involve his family, who are obviously part of the trigger for him. And maybe a part of you feels like, well, if you address the trigger, then that will help the most. But they're his support system in a way that if you fuck that up, then he hasn't got anything. And I get that they're not really a support system the way they're working right now. But you know what I mean? This might potentially make his panic even worse. It depends on everything on how they decide to react to this. Because Sophia, I feel like she sees what's going on with him. And she understands that this is too much and is trying to rein Roz in. But Roz doesn't see it that way. She sees it as her versus Sophia, rather than Sophia advocating for her kid. Because Roz is so completely disconnected from Jackson that the idea that Sophia would be basing what she's doing on her child's welfare hasn't even entered her head, which just goes to show how much Roz doesn't really care. Not really. She thinks she cares, but she's caring about a whole separate thing from her son. So I just I get it, Viv, but I just don't think that this was necessarily the right call. At the same time, I really don't know what else you can do. You know, like, I maybe would have gone and talked to his coach, or I don't know. I feel like I would have tried to talk to somebody that wasn't his parents, just to get things rolling somehow, so that somebody else is talking to him like, hey man, maybe we could find an alternative to how this is all happening, you know? But yeah, Jackson, it's just really, his story is like, feels like we're getting such short bursts of it. And I really want more. I really need there to be some kind of moment of realization in Roz. And I don't know that we're ever going to get that, because there are parents who just never really understand. You know, there are going to be people out there who just don't know how to listen and don't really have the capacity to see things from another perspective. So I just don't think that this was the right call. I get what she's worried about. And I can see being like, if you were to actually attempt suicide and I had known about this and didn't do anything, I would not be able to live with myself. And that's, on the one hand, understandable. But on the other hand, it's like, well, isn't that a little bit more about you? It's about you wanting to be able to live with yourself, not necessarily what's like best for the person. Just figure out a better way to handle everything. So yeah, it's just, I just feel bad about it because, like I said, I don't have a lot of better options that I would be able to suggest it, other than letting him cool off here and continuing to talk to him about it. But what can you do? Sometimes you can't get through that way either. So that's what's going on with Jackson. It seems like maybe Viv has just decided that she's not going to go after Dex after all, which I'm kind of okay with. And speaking of her and Dex, there's the whole thing with the quiz team. And the girl that they got to replace Maeve, she's eating a shrimp salad. They're calling it a shrimp cocktail, but it's not a cocktail in the way that an American would call it a cocktail. And evidently she gets food poisoning from it. I really love that she busts into the bathroom with explosive diarrhea while Viv has set aside a timer on her phone for masturbating in the bathroom. I don't know why I found that so funny, but it's just everything being so structured in her life. This is part of what, I sort of wish I could be more like this. It's something that I have often aimed for, and on the days that I do it, I've actually been very delighted with how productive I've been, and I go to sleep feeling exhausted, but in a good way, where it's yeah, I did a lot today. But it's also not a way to live, not really. But there's an appeal to it, you know? And her going in that bathroom and then her trying to find the spot while she's first starting off masturbating, and the expressions that she makes where she's no, no, no. Ah, there it is. I was fucking dying. That was so funny. But anyway, yeah, this girl gets diarrhea. She has food poisoning, as it turns out, and has to be cut from the team, not only because she's sick, but she's just not a team player. She's not fitting in. So they go crawling back to Maeve and ask her to join the team up again. And I was sort of worried that she was going to say no out of pride. But she agrees. She comes back. And then we get to see a moment of it being the deciding question at the end of the heat. And she has an idea what the answer is, but she consults Viv, and Viv is I don't think so. I think it's this. And she takes that cue and uses it, and it turns out to be right. Excuse me. So yeah, she manages to be a team player, and it looks like it has worked out for her. And it's a really nice bit of victory for her. So her mother comes home after work looking like she was crying. And I'm concerned that she has lost her job or something. She's hiding something. I don't want to think that she's using again. I get the feeling that if she were using, Maeve knows all the signs. And I think she would know instantly. So I don't think that's what's happening. But something is up. And I don't know what it is, and I'm not excited about finding out. But things like do seem to be sort of moving forward with the two of them. And that's clearly why our mom doesn't want to say anything about what's going on, because she's clinging to the fact that she and Maeve are doing better than they had been. So she doesn't want to fuck it up, and I can understand that. But dude, it's going to be so much worse when she inevitably finds out whatever you've been hiding. Just fucking tell her, you know? So anyway, this is when Maeve, she gets dressed up to go to the party because Eric invites her and is like, I know that Otis didn't invite you, but he wants you there and you should go. And he didn't mean what he texted. And you can see her feeling like she wants to believe Eric. Like she smiles when he says that and is kind of like, okay, yeah. And she gets herself all cuted up and she's leaving and Isaac stops her. And we have a moment with Isaac's brother, like helping him brush his teeth, which I was sort of like, I don't know. Well, you know what I'm realizing now? Because I was going to say he has the use of his hands. Like it's not like he can't brush his own teeth, but maybe getting up to the sink is kind of hard. And that's why he does it like that. Because in a chair, like unless the sink is protruding like a pedestal sink, getting up so that you can like spit into the sink when you're brushing your teeth is going to be really tricky. I guess you could go sideways, but that's like awkward. But anyway, so we find out later what happened. And basically his parents were junkies and didn't watch them. And he and his brother were climbing a tree and he goes up and falls. And that is what causes his injury. It was basically like negligence, which, yeah, this happened to Owen. And his parents weren't junkies, but they were incredibly negligent. And he broke his arm. And I'm going to cry talking about this. They made him wait on the couch overnight before taking him to a doctor in the morning because they did not want to pay for the emergency room. They decided to wait until he could just go to like an urgent care. So he had to lay on the couch for hours with a broken arm at like 8 years old because they just didn't want to deal with it at the time. And it's just like, how do you do that to a kid? You know, what? So yeah, this sort of negligence, that's something that I feel like when people think about abuse, they think about getting hit. They think about emotional abuse, but they don't think about what it's like when you just have parents that are absent, that don't care, don't notice, you know? And Isaac is clearly into Maeve and trying to sort of make a connection with her. And he's sort of, every time he runs into anybody, he's able to sense what the fuck is going on. So he gets her to bring him to the party. And they wind up at the top of the stairs of Otis's house. And he's like, did you not think of this? And she's like, I really didn't. I'm sorry. I really appreciated this, like, addressing access, because this is the kind of thing that you don't think about until somebody points it out to you. And it's genuinely a massive problem. Like, the United States has all kinds of laws about accessibility, and they are not enforced at all. Like, they really are not. And people get extremely resentful about having to obey them. And it's like, genuinely, it's the same as like the mask thing, where it's like, you have to put forth a tiny bit of effort to make life safer for somebody else. And you can't, without just like imploding, get a life. But I just really like the fact that they even address this, and we have the entire, like, Jackson's whole team gather around Isaac and carry him down. And I really enjoy that Isaac doesn't seem embarrassed at all. He's just like, yeah, awesome. Thanks, guys. Like, he's fine with it. Because I was sort of worried that he was going to be like, oh, this is so, you know, and there's none of that. He's just sort of like smirking. So I don't know. Maybe some of that is just a front, but I enjoy it. And he can see that Maeve is like into Otis and that there is something going on there. He can sense all of this. And later on, when he tells her how he really fell out of the tree, he says, Otis isn't going to understand this stuff. Like, he has his own family problems, but that's not the same thing as knowing that the people who were supposed to be ensure your survival and safety bailed on you. That's a very particular kind of thing. And the people who have scars from that are special. And he just doesn't have them. And I was like, homie's got a point. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a good couple, though. Having the same kinds of trauma just sometimes means that you traumatize each other in familiar ways that are comforting because the patterns are recognizable, not because they're healthy. The more you know. So, yeah, that is one of those that I'm like, I get what you're doing, but I'm not sure. That might be a red flag, actually, instead of like a green light. We'll see. And poor Maeve, like, I just don't know what to think about how Otis spoke to her. After telling her he can't see her anymore, and then, Eric obviously told her to show up, and he's like blaming her, even though he has to know. It was so mean-spirited, and Maeve just deserves so much better than that. So, yeah. And I'm over time, but I still have, I think, one more character that I wanted to talk about. Oh, no, I have two. So, really quickly, Amy has a bit of a meltdown here. And her boyfriend is trying to touch her. And we saw this last episode. But she just sort of keeps slapping him away when he's trying to, like, start playing around. And she didn't express how she was really feeling. She just sort of said she was tired from her long walk. But this episode, she has a moment where she thinks she sees the guy from the bus coming toward her. And I really appreciate that this show has found a way to acknowledge a sexual assault and have that storyline be part of the narrative without actually having there be a rape in the story. Do you know what I mean? Like, this could easily have been a whole other thing that would have been so much more than the show was prepared to handle in terms of storyline. And they found a good balance, I think, where it's like, we're going to talk about sexual assault and the trauma of it, but we're not going to like bite off more than we can chew and have it be something that's like traumatizing to watch the way that a rape scene would be or implied. It feels like they hit a really good note here with bringing it up and addressing it and being serious with it, but not being so triggering with the depiction of it. So she sees this guy coming toward her, and it turns out to be her boyfriend, and he like puts his hand on her shoulder and she jumps away. And she says, I don't want you touching me. And he says, I'm your boyfriend. And she says, I don't want a boyfriend anymore. And she just leaves the party, and we see her walking by herself. And I gotta be honest, I was so nervous for her walking by herself. She's on this like unlit road alone. And I really was like, please don't let some shit happen to her. And it doesn't. But I had a moment of just being like, oh, this looks like so nerve-wracking to me. And she's crying and clearly like doesn't seem to understand her own reaction to this. And I just really feel for her because that's what it's like, especially when women are just brought up to laugh shit off. Then when we have a very understandable reaction, we don't get it because it's always been minimized by everyone around us. So we think we're being weirdos when in fact everyone else has been the weirdos. We're being perfectly normal. I just really felt for her in that scene. So last person to talk about, Eric and Adam, technically. Eric is like, things are going well with Raheem. They have a good connection, and he asked Raheem at one point, like, why haven't you asked me to go all the way? And Raheem's like, I just didn't want to put too much pressure on you. And I appreciated that. I think Eric did too. But then we had this moment earlier in the convenience store where Adam is checking some girls out, and checking them out as a cashier, not like looking at them, leering. And one of them is talking to the other about how she found out about this party, and she says tromboner, which is what he nicknamed Eric. And it's a nice reminder that sort of shit sticks in high school. So he started some shit that's like still following Eric around. And I like the show acknowledging that with the dialogue like that. So it's clearly puts him in mind of Eric and what's going on with him. And he shows up at the party. And Eric goes out to speak to him, and it's a really good scene that was actually like tremendously emotionally affecting. He asks Eric, like, why did you stop coming to the window? And Eric is like, dude, you made me feel unsafe and hate myself. And I have just started to break out of that, but you clearly haven't. And you're covered in shame and you're trying to hide things. And I cannot go back there again. I am finally beginning to love who I am. And I just don't want to take any steps backward. And you really were a major part of why it has taken me so long to accept who I am. And Adam confesses that he thinks that he's bisexual and that he's scared and he feels like everyone hates him. And Eric tries to reach out and grab his hand, and Adam pulls away. And Eric is like, dude, you don't even want, like, you can't even hold my hand. And it's hard to like somebody when they don't like themselves. And this is one of those things that I think, I have mixed feelings on that whole premise. Loving yourself is a lifelong project. And expecting someone to fully love themselves before they can be worthy of love from others is not fair or true. But I do understand the meaning behind, if you are so covered in shame and self-loathing, you are not going to be a healthy partner for somebody else. You have to cope with some of that before you are capable of having a relationship. It's just, that is true. So eventually Adam, he has stayed outside. He didn't leave the party. But Ola comes out after the whole scene with fucking Otis, and she chucks a shoe at him. And he's like, what the fuck? And she just says she's angry. And he says, do you want to go break some shit? And we have a really nice scene of the two of them busting shit up. Oh my God, I'm so over time. And I just remembered Ola and Lily. But there's nothing much to be said about that because Lily refuses to talk about it still, and it's terrible. So, all right, I really have to wrap. I went over time on everything today. I have been almost 10 minutes over on every show. Ugh, I'm the worst. I talk too much. Okay. I love you guys so much. Thank you all very, very much for listening. And thank you to Ashleigh for commissioning this. I appreciate you all. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.